The internet is full of entrepreneurs and influencers telling what is their favorite books. There's always the same books. Ego is the Enemy, Outliers, Sapiens, Sex at Dawn, The Way of the Superior Man, 48 Laws of Power, yada, yada, yada. Some of these are great books, but I'm going to share with you 3 books I haven't really heard anybody else talk about that are amazing and that impacted my life positively that for some reason nobody ever mentioned. The first book I want to talk about is by Chris Cray, and it's titled Very Funny, very short, fairly interesting, and a reasonably cheap book about studying organizations. And it's not a big book. It's a fairly dense read because it's written by Chris, who's a professor out of the UK in a somewhat academic sense. But if you're familiar in how kind of the modern society has evolved, particularly from like management perspective, I think for someone who's an entrepreneur, someone who's interested in politics, or somebody who's interested in broader macro societies, I think this is a very kind of heretic way to look at how skeptically change management, human resource theory, all of these are just the same old BS, and how we get both consciously and subconsciously manipulated as part of society, and how people in charge are actually aware of that. And it's just another kind of a label when there's a new way to look at society and big groups of people, how they come up with a new theory, and the new theory's only goal is just to keep you happy and productive. It's a little bit of a pessimistic book, but I think it approaches it from such an intellectual way to explain the narrative that we've had over the last 100+ years and how consistently people get played. Second book that nobody ever talks about is Bhagavad Gita. No, I'm just joking. It is Whatever You Think the Opposite by Paul Arden. He has a bunch of other good books, like It's Not How Good You Are, It's How Good You Want to Be, God Explained in a Taxi Ride. Very funny. He was one of the first creatives at Saatchi & Saatchi, the creative agency, and he's just brilliant. And it's a very short book with a lot of short chapters, short visuals, but it kind of shakes more of like creative thinking. I'm someone who's always been more left brain leaning, and I think very logically. I don't know if it's growing up in Finland, being kind of engineer, science oriented person. This book really helped me to break boundaries and challenge myself on thinking. Obviously the title is Whatever You Think the Opposite. It is a book I've only heard some like really cool art creative people talk about, but like generally I don't see this in the Cosmo, and I really don't know many books in the whole world that have been better than this. Third book is Iceberg Slim.
The PIMP.
Again, joking. This one is actually in the last year I've seen some podcasters and influencers talk about, but Anthony DeMello, Awareness. You can see it's pretty broken, but this is a book more than 20 years ago that changed my life. Anthony DeMello is originally from India. He's a spiritual Jesuit priest who gave these lectures I would watch on YouTube, his old recordings. There's not much material on him, but what is brilliant. And what I always loved about this, that it was like almost like a self-help book, but by never telling you how you should think or what you should do. But it was a book that told very short stories that were often funny. Anthony DeMello reminds me a lot of this kind of, I think, Turkish Persian thinker called Nasruddin Hoxha, that lived a long time ago. I don't know if this person ever existed, or was it just part of like way to pass down stories from generation to generation. But Nasruddin Hoxha was this old man, really poor, but he was considered a wise person in his society, and he would play people tricks all the time that were really funny, but those tricks, or being like a jester joker, would teach the society and other people a lesson about life. And that reminds me a lot of Anthony DeMello. I think he tells these like tongue-in-cheek stories about life that challenge you to think what's real. The book is called Awareness. I think the whole point is being aware of what is love, what is reality, and realizing that most things we think are true might not actually be true. Few stories that I really love from Anthony DeMello. One is about there's a war between Pakistan and India, which is a lot of people know happens, and the Indian soldiers capture some Pakistani soldiers and they get sentenced to death. And they get one last wish before they get killed. And they wish that they want to see their home native country of Pakistan one more time. So The Indians are like, sure, that's fine. So they climb a mountain on the Indian side to look into Pakistan. They climb the mountain, and the Indian soldiers say to the Pakistanis like, hey, now you can look into Pakistan. And they start crying. They say, this is the most beautiful country in the world, and they're so touched. And then the Indian soldiers, oh, sorry, I got the directions wrong. It's actually, that's India. The Pakistan is that other way. The other story, very similar, is about an old man who lives between Finland and Russia. And after the Second World War, there was a new line that was drawn between Finland and Russia. And they just drew a line on a map. And then actually soldiers had to go and put the country lines, and it went right through an old man's farm. So then the people from the Russian side and the Finnish side were saying, it's like, well, we don't really care if you're on the Finnish or Russian side. Why don't you think about it and tell us which side you want to be, and we'll draw the line of the country just around your farm. It makes no material difference to us either way. So the old man thought for a bit and said, I'll choose the Finnish side. So the Russian soldiers were like, oh, that's surprising. Why did you choose Finland over Russia? And the old man says, I love Mother Russia, but I don't think I can handle one more Russian winter. These stories, I think, are a funny, entertaining way to talk about the illusions we have on an everyday life. Again, I've seen in the last year or so, people talk about a little more about this book, but it's been a game changer for me for the last 20 years. And it's something right up there for me with like Hermann Hesse and some of these old thinkers. But definitely also check out Nasruddin Hoja's stories online if you want to Google them. Besides sharing some of the books I like that nobody really seems to be talking about, I wanted to ask for a second opinion from my good friend Jesse Michels of the show American Alchemy. He's not only a good friend, he's also one of the most brilliant people I know, and he reads more books than anyone else I know. And he reads a lot of weird books, so I thought he would be the perfect person to ask for some additional book advice on books you might not have heard about.
What are books that you've loved, but you don't hear anybody really talking about them?
Oh, I have a great one for you. It's a book called The Man Who Mastered Gravity, and it's a book about a guy named Townsend Brown. He's this weird, kooky anti-gravity inventor all throughout the, I guess, really 20s through the 60s is when he did his main work. And he's like the Dos Equis guy. He's like the most interesting person in the world. Like, he pops up at insane points in American history and has his hand in so many different things. And I think made more progress on anti-gravity stuff than people realize.
What about autobiographies? I know you run quite a bit. People always love to talk about the Jobs and the Musk, but like, who are autobiographies or biographies?
My favorite biographies are The Rise of Roosevelt by Edmund Morris. There's actually one about the creator of Time magazine, Henry Luce, by my college professor named Alan Brinkley, and it's really well written. It's about kind of modern media.
What's a God tier book? The Bible?
The Bible, yeah, it's really good. Worth reading, yeah. It's good. You should read the Bible.
Have you heard of the Santa Salt Shrooms? That's right up there.
That's good,
No.
for sure.
What are books you love? Particularly, is there books that you don't never see people in the internet talk about? Is there like a hidden gem? Comment below, and I would love to read it.